Candidate and governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin, joins me now. Governor, should these lawmakers be fired?
Yeah, they absolutely should be fired. They should be recalled. You know, they've retreated. It's not like they're reloading. They've retreated. They're not doing their job. And bless his heart, that Wisconsin governor is doing all that he can to allow his state to be solvent. And he certainly isn't getting any help from the Democrats.
Well, so as a former governor yourself, you can certainly understand what he's going through. If your legislators left the legislature in Alaska, would you be hunting them down?
You know, you do need to call them back and get them to be held accountable and have them do their job. I mean, what a deal this governor of Wisconsin is having to deal with. As in states, you know, we have, for most of us, constitutional mandates to balance our budgets, and we can't just go out and print more money. We have an obligation to live within our means, and that's what this governor is trying to do.
Well, clearly, and, you know, I think the shame of it is that you've got all of these protesters who were in there for so long, and the taxpayers going to end up cleaning up the mess in the state capitol, but that's another issue. But as you say, when you talk about budgets, we've got a big issue now with the federal budget. And of course, there is a stance by the Tea Party, and I'm curious as to whether or not you agree with it, where they are literally willing to risk government shutdown if their compromise on the federal budget isn't met. What do you think should happen here?
Well, I think these independent Tea Party Americans are just full of common sense, who know that, you know, the feds were only bringing in $2.2 trillion a year, and yet we're spending $3.5 trillion a year. Something's got to give. We absolutely have got to cut the budget, and we've got to reform entitlement programs and start living within our means. So these independent Tea Party Americans, I don't believe I'm certainly not buying into all the rhetoric that we have to result in a government shutdown if we don't give and grow government and not make these cuts, because we bring in $7 billion a day. If we took that $7 billion a day and fund the essentials and service our debt, those things coming first as our highest priority, then this whole budget discussion doesn't have to lead to a government shutdown. I don't buy into all that rhetoric.
But let me ask you this, though. If the government were to shut down, what would actually happen?
Well, that's a good question. It's amazing that the budget gurus there in D.C. aren't telling the public what actually happens if some delayed programs are going to be a result, or if some bills don't necessarily get paid as quickly as they would get paid. You know, that's a question that certainly a lot of us would like to know. What does this really entail, this quote-unquote government shutdown? But again, if priorities are made wisely and the dollars, the tax revenues coming in on a daily basis into the federal government, if we use those to meet the essentials, then it doesn't have to result in the shutdown.
And what do you think should happen to some of these representatives who were brought in, you know, as Tea Party candidates who are actually going along with the compromise? I mean, what do you think is going to happen to them back in their district?
To tell you the truth, I think it's a shame that there's already some Tea Party candidates, some freshmen in there who believe that status quo is the only way to operate in D.C. You know, they got to remember that we work so extremely hard to hire them to do what is right for the American electorate. So they need to stand strong. They need to have those still spines and just use that common sense, and fiscal conservative issues need to be played out in their budgeting process and not compromise. There's no need to compromise on principle. We have no choice, Judge. We have absolutely no choice. Our nation is heading towards bankruptcy, and this is immoral, it's unethical, it's unfair to future generations to continue down the road we're going.
And, you know, talking about bankruptcy and talking about money, there are many in the Tea Party, Governor, including Rand Paul, who are against foreign aid or international aid, including the money that we give to Israel. Where do you stand on this?
You know, I'm sure that there is some waste and fraud in foreign aid, and we need to find efficiencies and not give to any regime that would seek to harm Americans in any sense of the word harm. I don't support that kind of foreign aid at all. But when it comes to Israel, no, I stand strong with Israel, and unapologetically, I say that America should keep this strong democratic ally that we have there in the Middle East and allow for protections around Israel. Think of what this state, Israel, has gone through and what they have suffered through and what they have triumphed over, it is real telling about their tenacity and their character, and it's just one reason, that character, as to why it is that we want them as our friend.
And you know what's interesting about Israel, and I've been there several times, is you see the young women who are in the military, who are in combat, and you are energized at their enthusiasm and their love for their country. But talking about money going to other countries, and I'll bet so many Americans have no idea how much foreign aid we give to other countries. Mexican President Calderon was in our country this week, and it seemed as though he was chastising us again about the problems at the border. And yet President Obama seemed to be saying that he has shown extraordinary courage in the drug war in Mexico. First of all, do you think that he has? And secondly, what do you make of the president, being so complimentary of Calderon, who comes here to chastise us every chance he gets?
Yeah, and this is at least 2 times now that the Mexican president has come here to chastise Americans, and we just kind of, it seems like our leaders kowtow to him and allow him to speak to the Americans as he does, when I think he's quite off base in terms of America's courage and our desire to have a robust economy and to have a safe and secure homeland, and that's why we want to secure the borders, and that's why we want to encourage that president to start doing some things right in his country, including cracking down on the drug lords and doing things to create jobs and opportunities in his own country so that illegal immigrants won't be enticed to come over the border illegally into America and try to seize opportunities that we would provide. Of course, the legal immigration, that's a whole different story, but it amazes me that our president kind of seems to kowtow in this situation, as he does in so many situations when it comes to foreign policy, to the Mexican president.
And I wish we had more time to talk about it, but certainly the whole issue of customs agents, in northern Mexico, and we just had one who was recently shot, and the fact that they can't carry weapons there. I mean, it's got to be so frustrating for the families. But I want to move on to the 2 American airmen who were shot dead in Germany this week. Here's a sound of P.J. Crowley speaking for the Obama administration. Take a listen.
We are looking into the individual who shot our service members. We're looking into his relationship with others. I don't know that we've made a judgment yet on whether it was someone acting alone or somebody acting in concert with others. For example, was the shooting of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords a terrorist attack? I mean, you have to look at the evidence and look at the motivation, and then you make a judgment.
All right, Governor, there you have it. They absolutely refuse to call this terrorism, even though the shooter shoots 2 airmen on a military bus, yelling Allah Akbar. And why is he so afraid? Why is the administration so afraid to admit that this is terrorism?
Why is the administration so naive and assuming that the American public is going to accept a comment like PJ's that essentially equates a crazed maniac in Arizona shooting Gabby Giffords to this terrorist who tried to and was successful in gunning down our servicemen overseas as he did yell out Allah Akbar. This is, to me, I think reflective of, remember the incident at Fort Hood, where it took weeks and weeks and weeks for the Obama administration to finally admit that there was a terrorist involved there.
Why do you think, Governor, he's afraid to call it terrorism? I don't understand why the reluctance to be objective about what's going on.
His worldview, our president's worldview, certainly seems a bit different than, I believe, than most Americans, because, Judge, I think if you asked most Americans on the street, if someone was hell-bent on killing one of our military personnel, yelling Allah Akbar, and had terrorist ties, if you can't see that clearly as a terrorist, then we've got some things quite askew in our administration.
Okay, all right. Well, when we come back,